Welcome back. All right, time for another edition of my favorite players. Looking today at the Boston Bruins. Boston, a team that I've rooted for since the late 80s, and I was already a fan of the Canucks at the time. I didn't know that they weren't going to get along. I didn't know that 2011 was going to happen. And honestly, before 2011 and since 2011, there hasn't really been anything that's happened that's had me say, well, I can't be a fan of both. But at any rate, let's go ahead and dive in. It is only 1 through 20. I did not add a 21 for Boston like I did for Vancouver. But at number 20, and an honorable mention in this one goes to Tim Thomas, who just misses. And I would throw an honorable mention at Dave Christian as well. He didn't play that long in Boston, but I really like the guy. All right, so number 20 on the list, player whose career sadly wasn't as long as it should have been, and that's Marc Savard. Marc Savard, a player that I really enjoyed seeing play for Boston. Wish he'd played longer. This is a storyline with plenty of hockey players over the years where, you want them all to retire when they're in their late 30s, maybe even, 40 or older in some cases. And with all the goals and points that they were destined to have. But in many cases, that doesn't happen for players, as was the case with Marc Savard. At the time that he got hurt, he was a very good player. And, so he's number 20 on the list. Wish he'd been around and won that 2011 Stanley Cup with the Bruins. Number 19. Joe Juno. Joe Juno came in as a rookie and just played absolutely fantastic hockey for the Boston Bruins, even had a 100-point season in there. And I like Juno quite a bit. Sadly, he wasn't a Bruin as long as I had hoped that he would be, especially after that rookie year. I was really excited about the Bruins in the early 90s. Gotta say, I really was, and then that got kind of submarined not too long after that. But, Joe Juno was a part of a pretty good young core that the Bruins had at the time, and it just didn't quite get across that line. They didn't quite get to a Stanley Cup and win it. Number 18. Now, I'm just going to say, if I was ranking general managers, Don Sweeney, not going to be ranked highly for me personally. But Don Sweeney, the player for the Boston Bruins, was a heart and soul guy, and he played for Boston for a long, long time, and he kind of gave everything to the organization. So I understand why the organization kept him around. I understand how he ended up being the general manager, and at times he's made some good decisions. He has. That being said, Sweeney's number 18 on my players list. Number 17 on the players list, a current member of the Bruins. And I will miscount which ones are current and which ones are not. That happens. It's one of those things. And it's not an age thing. I would have done it in my 20s too. Morgan Geekie, who I'm very glad that they've kept this season. Really like Morgan Geekie's game a lot. I think he's hit that next level with Boston, one that I thought he would hit in Seattle and didn't. But I'm glad he's hit it in Boston, and hopefully he can do it again. That's always the tricky part. You have that big breakout season. Can you follow that up with another one? We'll find out. But Morgan Geekie, a player that I definitely like playing for the Boston Bruins. Number 16 was not on the list last time. So, over the last 5 years, Brad Marchand's moved up the list. He is not top 10 for me. Marchand, there are still things that happened earlier in his career that I couldn't have Marchand on the board. But Marchand, as the years went by, I thought his game settled down. There are still times where he plays on the edge. That's just how he plays. And there are times where his temper gets the best of him when his team is losing. That's who Marchand is. But his time as captain and just, I don't know, Marchand over the years has won me over enough that he ends up on the board here. I did have years where I would say to myself, I root for Boston. I don't necessarily root for Brad Marchand. Where he would do something stupid and I'd be like, I'm going to hear about this tonight in the videos, and rightfully so. There's a playlist for Marchand on the channel, for instance, because there were just so many times that he would cross the line. That is a playlist that has not had to be updated because I haven't seen him cross the line in a while, and he just won a Stanley Cup ring with Florida. He's staying in Florida, but that doesn't make me hate the player. I don't blame him. Number 15. And dropping from where he was the last time, because this does happen, Torrey Krug. I still remember Krug's time in Boston well. It's a shame that he's now dealing with injury and it looks like he won't be coming back to play for St. Louis. That's an absolute shame. Krug, an excellent offensive defenseman, a really nice guy from what I've seen in his time in Boston. I would say from what I've seen, because while we love hockey players and we love covering them, and I love covering them and talking about them, I know that the player off the ice is probably different than the player on the ice, and the way they talk to the media may be one thing, and the way they are in private is another. So with that acknowledged, I never saw anything from Krug in his professional behavior on the ice, off the ice, that I said, well, that's not a guy that I'm going to root for. So, yeah, Krug gets 15th on the list. Number 14. Way back with this one. Sadly. Rick Middleton. Rick Middleton, a player who was really kind of the epitome of the Boston Bruins of the early, mid-'80s, and was an absolute steal for the team from the Rangers. At the time I started watching hockey, Middleton was one of the best Bruins on the ice, and good point producer, good goal scorer. And I think the nice thing with Middleton is, go back and look at hockey cards from him from the 80s. He looks like a guy you just hang out with at a pub. And you sit down and you have some fish and chips and you just talk about hockey. He looks like just your regular, ordinary, everyday guy. And most hockey players, though, in the 80s looked like they were about 45, comparatively speaking to now. But, yeah, Middleton, I never heard anything negative about Middleton. So, yeah, number 14. Number 13. I'm not sure why I didn't have David Krerache on my list last time out, but I'm righting it wrong. David Krejci's on the list this time. Spent his entire career in Boston and played great. And even after a break from hockey and coming back over, he still played really well for Boston. Krejci I view as a heart and soul guy for the Boston Bruins. A big part of the 2011 Stanley Cup run. Had some other good playoffs in there as well. And I don't think Boston's truly gotten over losing Krejci and Bergeron down the middle, because who would? But yeah, Krejci may be a bit underrated at points during his career as well. Number 12. Yeah, all right. Number 12. I'm just debating about whether I want Jeremy Swayman at 11 or 12. He's at 12. Jeremy Swayman, I know he did not have a good year, but this is where I diverge a little bit from maybe some other hockey fans. If a player that I root for has a bad year, I don't decide I don't like that player anymore. I don't decide I'm not rooting for them anymore. I decide, you know what? I still like the player. Hopefully, next season they turn it around. So Swayman is still on the list for me, and I think he belongs there. Now, part of it is the guy at number 11. Linus Ullmark. So, a big part of Swayman being here is Ullmark as well, and I acknowledge that. Because the goalie hug is one of the greatest things in hockey, and it's a shame that it's gone, that Ullmark went to Ottawa. He did get Ottawa back to the playoffs, and good for him there, but I miss the goalie hug. Obviously, Swayman can't just recreate that with Korpisalo, and then you have it. No, it was their thing, and it's a shame. Those runs by the Boston Bruins, while they didn't end in playoff success, those regular seasons I'm never going to forget. They were fantastic. They set new records, and yeah, I wish they'd won a Stanley Cup, but those regular seasons were a lot of fun. I really, truly do just enjoy regular seasons like this. I sometimes think hockey fans would maybe be a little bit happier if they enjoyed that regular season success. I'm not saying that it overshadows playoff success, because it can't. But acknowledge that regular season success is still success. And that these are still really good years. It ended in sadness, sure, but it was still a really good year. All right, so getting into the top 10. Boston Bruins, Glenn Murray. or as I knew him from the early 90s, Little Cam. That was the nickname he got when he came into the NHL. Glenn Murray was a slow starter, but once he got things going, he was excellent for the Boston Bruins. He was excellent for the Boston Bruins in 2 go-rounds, in fact. I was so happy when they got him back because I was really mad when they traded him. So, I don't remember, did they trade him or did he leave as a free agent? I think they traded him. Either way, Glenn Murray, to me, a Bruin, just a Bruin. I don't care about his time with the Kings. Boston Bruin definitely for Glenn Murray. So don't look for him on the Kings list when I get to LA. But I think Glenn Murray was a lot of fun to watch and good goal scorer and all around solid player. Number 9, a current member of the team who I hope is good to play right out of the gate this year, and that's Charlie Makavoy. Everybody from here on is named Glenn. I picked 10 guys named Glenn. Or I'm just going to change the names to Glenn. No. Charlie Makavoy at number 9. Excellent defenseman. Seems to get better every year. The tricky part is, this past season, he got injured and missed a large portion of the season. So, McAvoy is a player to keep an eye on going forward. I think that he is going to remain one of the best Boston Bruins. Definitely their best blue liner. And a leader. And a leader at a young age, too. So, yeah, future's really bright for him. Next time when I do a list like this, maybe 5 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if McAvoy's higher up. But he's below number 8, Zdeno Chara. Chara, absolutely amazing run as Boston Bruin. He ended up being a captain as well. Chara to me is absolutely ridiculous. And I do think McAvoy's the next captain for Boston. I almost slipped there and said, Captain McAvoy. I think he's got to be the next guy. But Zdeno Chara wore that C for a while, and I mean, what's not to like about Zdeno Chara? He was one of the best defensemen in the NHL. He did win a Norris Trophy at one point as well, and I was very glad that Ottawa didn't keep him. I thought that benefited the Boston Bruins greatly, that when they had the choice between Chara and Redden, that Ottawa chose to keep Redden, and Chara goes to Boston. And after a bad first year on that contract, in fact, after that first year in Boston, I could totally understand people seeing it as a bad contract. It got a lot better for Boston and for Chara. Number 7 on the list. So before everybody piled on Jeremy Swayman for how awful he is, Tuukka Rask was the one that got a lot of criticisms, and we heard a lot about how awful he was. Tuukka Rask had his ups and downs during his time in Boston. He did not win a Stanley Cup as a starter, but he did get them to multiple Stanley Cup finals as a starter, which is still, in my mind, pretty good. I still think that's pretty good. Because if you look around the NHL and you just ask yourself how many goaltenders have led a team to the final, it's not a lot. It's not a lot of current goaltenders. And so I think Tuukka Rask, excellent goaltending for Boston. And his playoff numbers were good. So I get it. I understand there's criticism of some of the games he played, but I was always a fan of Tuukka Rask. Never turned against him, not once. Number 6 on the board. With every passing year, I become more and more of a fan of David Pastrnak. I think Pastrnak has... absolutely, he is the best forward on the team, and I don't think there's any argument about that. He kind of is their offense, and I do find it entertaining when people complain when he's cold. He's not scoring enough goals, and it's like, because all you have to do is shut down Pastrnak. If you're coaching against Boston, you go, see that guy there wearing 88? Stop him. And Boston's done. And generally speaking, that's a pretty good plan. So yeah, Pastrnak at number 6 for me. Number 5. Adam Oates. I have a jersey with Adam Oates on the back. I got that one from Full Moon Jerseys, I believe, on eBay. One of the many 80s style jerseys of the Boston Bruins that I have, because that was the era I grew up with. Love that jersey. And Adam Oates was one of my all-time favorite players. And when we get to the St. Louis portion of this, we'll see Adam Oates again. I'm just spoiling it for people. Honestly, I could put Adam Oates on the list for almost any team he played for, although it might get more difficult to argue it in some cases, but not with Boston. He was fantastic. He was outspoken as a player, too. Adam Oates was not scared to tell you what he really thought. And sometimes that led to him getting traded, which is part of the reason why players don't tell you what they really think, because they could be gone. They could be out of a job. So, yeah. Adam Oates, though, wasn't scared. He wasn't scared to tell people what he really thought about the team that he played for, even if some of those thoughts were negative. And I appreciated that from him at the time. Number 4. I don't like players that just, toe the party line. Ray Bourque. So Ray Bourque, this is where I've made some changes since the last time I did this. Ray Bourque for me is at number 4 now. Bourque still an all-timer, arguably one of the best defensemen I ever watched play the game. I think that Ray Bourque is, he's got so many records for the Boston Bruins. I don't think those are going to be in any danger anytime soon. And it is, I always say with Bourque, it's a shame he had to go to Colorado to win the Stanley Cup, but I'm glad he got it. 2001, that was a year that I wasn't necessarily overjoyed to see the Avalanche win the Cup, but I was overjoyed for him. That was a great moment, and while Boston got to the final in 88 and 90, they just weren't able to win it, and so then he had to go somewhere else. Number 3 on the list. So switching places with Bourque from the last time I did this is Patrice Bergeron. Bergeron, we talk a lot about, great two-way forwards and great players. And one thing that I bring up is, so who makes you yell at the TV for making a stupid move? Who makes you yell at the TV for passing the puck where nobody is? Or, that kind of thing. And so we as armchair players are like, what is he thinking there? Like any of us wouldn't have done the same thing. But Bergeron, I never had that moment. I don't remember ever having a moment with Bergeron where I was like, what's he thinking there? That was stupid. Why would you put the puck there? I never once had that experience, even though I've watched Boston pretty religiously for a long time. And so before I had the channel, I would still make sure that I watched as much Vancouver, Boston, and Dallas as I could. And I never saw anything from Bergeron that made me say, well, clearly he's in over his head. He's not that great. One name that I do expect to see on this list at some point is Poitras. I think Poitras still has the possibility, not necessarily to be another Bergeron. I think Boston kind of rushed him a little bit, but I think he's still going to be a very good two-way forward and hopefully ends up on this board. Number 2, runner-up, Andy Moog. Andy Moog, of course. He was my favorite goaltender from the run he had with the Oilers in the early 80s, and he helped them upset the Montreal Canadiens. And I became a huge fan of Andy Moog right on the spot. And then Moog was I didn't think he was treated well by the Oilers. He didn't think he was treated well by the Oilers. He ends up going to Boston, and then he ends up playing against the Oilers in the final and just couldn't quite get over the top. I say that as if those series were close. They weren't, but Andy Moog became my favorite goaltender. I loved his mask, too. His mask is a classic, and he was my favorite player on the team, outside of one player who sits at number 1. But Moog was the guy for me in terms of goaltenders. Just always a big fan. Then he ended up in Dallas, which made me happy, too. I was like, great. And then he went to Montreal, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you in Montreal? Come on, you know it's wrong. It's like when Chris Nyland went from Montreal to Boston. That was just wrong. And in this case, Mo going to Montreal, I never got that. Number 1 on the list will surprise no one. No one watching this now is going to be like, really? He was a Cam Neely fan? Well, yeah. So when I was a teenager, my walls were adorned mostly by Samantha Fox posters. It's the 80s. It's what happens. But there were a couple of hockey posters that were in there. I had Luc Robitaille and Cam Neely on my wall. And Cam Neely was for the very specific reason that I thought he was one of the best forwards I'd ever seen play at that point. Now, at that point, I'd only been watching hockey for 7 or 8 years. And Robitaille was because he was such a late draft pick and he made it. And I thought that was a great story. But Cam Neely, absolutely my favorite player for a long time. I have a Boston jersey with Neely's name on the back. And even though I have many concerns about the Boston Bruins and their trajectory, I have complaints about both Neely and Sweeney and how some things are done with the Boston Bruins. It does not affect how I viewed him as a player. It does not affect my view that he was my favorite Boston Bruin that I ever watched play. Absolutely fantastic. And I thought the Canucks were foolish for trading him. And sure enough, they were. Even though Barry Peterson at the time was putting up decent point totals as a center in Boston. I understood the trade. I just disagreed with it. And Cam Neely's number 1 on the board. So there you go. My 20 favorite Boston Bruins. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.